I'm Alberto Reyes, Queen's University, Belfast, and the common way that we communicate our science is through the peer-reviewed literature, and of course that requires that we go through this mystical process of peer review, and it's kind of the one process that we all have in common, no matter where we come from, what country we're in. And so our process with this panel, our hope with this panel is that we can sort of demystify this process of peer review, in particular for those of us who are new to the black art of peer reviewing. And so I'm very honored that we have a panel of distinguished guests here.
So I think we all know you submit a paper, many of you have this experience, or maybe you will soon, and you just know in general it's going to go to an editor, then the editor is going to send it out to a few reviewers, 2, 3, 4, who knows. And then you get comments back. And we do it, and we just know it's going to happen, but why? So I had a little look to try and see why we do peer review, and I found this quote, which is the peer review process is a turf battle with the ultimate prize of the knowledge, science, or doctrine being published. Yeah, if you've gotten this far, it's gone horribly, horribly wrong. It shouldn't be a fight. It shouldn't be a miserable process. The ultimate goal of peer review is really maintaining the quality and integrity of the scientific record. In this case, it's our published records, our works. These are supposed to be right, or at least right at the time, or great idea. And we've been doing this since the 1700s, and I guess, in the early days of science, didn't really fit, your wheel rolled, or it didn't, your spear held together, or you got eaten. You don't need peer review. So that's kind of what the editor wants out of your review, but how you get there, I think we'll have a lot to say, a lot of different ways to get there.
So Alicia made it sound so simple, and so obviously now we all know what we're doing, but I know myself, the very first time that I was asked to give a review, it was a terrifying moment. So, is there any advice, in particular to young scientists, that, why don't we ask Chris first? What is the most critical element of a review that you think has to absolutely have in order to be useful to you as an editor?
As a reviewer, I think first of all, don't panic, which is a common complaint. Just out of interest, how many people here have actually done reviews? Oh, it's a fair number of you. Okay. How many of you really enjoyed the process? Fair enough. It's not meant to be one of those dreadful experiences that one has to suffer. There's a whole load of things I'm sure will come out of this, but I think to be the key thing as a reviewer is to be fair and honest to the paper. It's very easy, particularly if you are an expert in an area where you look at a paper, it maybe doesn't agree with what you published on, and it's very tempting just to find rubbish and send it back. And I think as an editor, the number of times we get that from reviewers, it's quite remarkable. And you can sniff them out with experience, but you can't be an expert in everything. So I think one of the first things is to be absolutely honest. And I always remember my PhD supervisor, the one thing he said to me, and I've always done this, is when you're asked to review something, and I know it doesn't always be true, but it's to put your name to the review. If you're confident enough that if someone challenged your review, and you say, yes, I stand by that, it's actually really important. If you're honest with the paper, and you put your name to it, you'll be looking good. We can talk about some of the other details.
That's an interesting point. I'm curious how many of you have written your reviews anonymously versus signed them, because I got similar advice from a senior colleague when I first started as well. Was you should be confident enough to write your name down on it and be that confident. So I'm just curious, as young scientists, how I've written anonymous reviews. Sure. Anyway, Denis, one of the things that we argued about, well, not argued, but we discussed by email was the issue of, is there such a thing as not useful review? And one of the things you said was that even a poorly done review can be useful in the sense that it provides you with some editorial information.
What I wanted to say is that when we receive poor reviews, I personally reject them, because I think that it's not useful. As Chris was saying, reviewers should do the best job they can do, so the reviews must be very constructive and helpful for the authors, even if the paper is rejected. I think this is something, if you want science to progress and keep going on progressing, you have to help people and you have to provide the best review possible, so you must be very constructive. But I wanted to make a comment about some of the slides that Alicia was showing, especially when she was mentioning do the results fit with previous work. It can be dangerous to fit with a kind of dogma. And I have a very simple example from a French-speaking scientist. It was a long time ago. Perhaps some of you were not born at that time. So, but I am a paleontologist on background. So, and there was a lady paleontologist working in an obscure lab who was working on a great record in the Vosges area. And she found that during the last, what we were calling at that time the last interglacial, she was finding three very intense warming. And at that time, she tried to publish in the French Academy of Science journal that she found this very unusual three warm events during the last interglacial. And she was rejected because it was not fitting with what we knew at that time. So she published in Quaternary Science a famous paper about La Grande Pile that everybody knows, which has been used by a lot of people. And it was the start of a new era because she was demonstrating that stage, what is now stage 5, has three warm intervals that everybody recognizes and everybody is using. So you have to be also careful with data or...
Would it be a fair comment to ask them, you have to go to those publications and maybe show people or whatever that what you're seeing is like consistent or not consistent, and what, because you have no way to actually assess that, or sometimes you don't even have access to that reference material? Is that a fair thing to do? And to be like, look, I actually can't assess this because I don't know the publication, the literature, and I can't even access that literature to look at it.
I don't think I've ever come across that, but that seems perfectly fair because you need, you need to be able to see what's out there to kind of assess it. I don't think they're going to send you translations of every paper, but if they could sort of summarize in each paper, I don't think that would be an unfair request. I don't know.
Just when the microphone is moving, we are facing this with a lot of Chinese literature. A lot of papers written in Chinese.
Just wondering if you could sort of walk me through the physical process, actual process you would go through reviewing a paper as an individual. How much time do you spend on it? Do you correct grammar? How many times do you read the paper? How many days? This sort of idea of, breaking down step by step of what you do individually. Do you Google the person to see who they are, what's making their career?
I want to reply first because I am French, and you probably notice that I am speaking Franglish, and I am writing Franglish. So my first step is not to correct the grammar or the language, and I am looking at the science, and I am mentioning it to the editor who asked me to review a paper. I am not interested by the language. The language is not my purpose. I am asked to review the science, and this is what I do. And usually I spend, it can be 2 or 3 days on a paper, minimum. So I can tell you it's a lot of work. If you want to be honest and constructive and positive and helping people, not only you have to read carefully, but you have also to provide a review which is helpful.
That's an interesting point. I always wondered about how much information is there too much detail? Is there such a thing as too detailed? I think we've seen the couple sentence reviews, and then I always thought, oh God, I'm just getting, this is ridiculous. I gotta cut myself off after a couple pages. And maybe it's really helpful to you as editors to have very detail. You don't get drowned in the details.
I have gotten a review that was longer than the original paper. But I have to say, that reviewer he really went through it. It was a first-time author, and I don't think this author's advisor was really providing the feedback, so this reviewer kind of took that on, like, let's think about these ideas more. And the resulting paper was incredible, because it was guided by two advisors, the author, and it really looked at every detail and found some interesting things that weren't apparent at first, so came up with some really great ideas that weren't in there. And I think that sort of review is great, and if you have the time and energy to put into that, please do, because you just make the paper that much better.
Sorry, just following on from that point, actually, also with not it being a world of pain, the other side of this is actually spending the time on something which is unpublished, and actually it really does help sharpen your thinking, your intellectual ideas, because hopefully, or you don't want to kick it out of touch, you're looking at skeptically, and I personally have looked at papers where I thought, I'm not sure about that. And when I've sat down and actually gone through the data, I've actually thought, hang on, they've got a point here. and I still get that occasionally now. So, and I think certainly when you're starting your academic career, reviewing is a wonderful way of honing those skills, where you look at data, you look at ideas, and you think basically, wow, does this work or not? And so it's not just, got to clear this, I've done my duty. It does actually have a benefit the other way as well.
There's a comment in the back, and then we'll move over.
What you face very often is actually reviews in which you find sort of the killing arguments for a paper. And the killing argument is all then very often, you need more data, you need more results in some sense. Now we are not living in an ideal world. In some sense, papers are always progress reports. And I find it sometimes very interesting then that editors follow these recommendations and don't really look critical at them. If you would have another 3 years, another phase in your PhD to follow these recommendations, it would be very nice. So I would like to hear your opinion on how you deal with these sort of comments, and because sometimes they are really difficult to identify. And the second question is with regard to the authors' names. Other communities are now thinking more and more about anonymous reviews, so that not the reviewers are anonymous, but that the authors are anonymous to the reviewers, because at least in some communities it has become very clear that there is a bias in the review process, and I would like to hear what's your opinion on that.
I will reply to the second question, because reviewing a proposal. At that time, I was in a panel from the European Commission on climate program, and there was a proposal which has to be reviewed, among others, and the panel was ranking this. There was 2 steps. The first step was anonymous. The second step, the anonymity was removed. At the first step of this reviewing, this proposal was badly ranked, because yes, it was written very rapidly and very quickly, so it doesn't seem very sound. But when the names were removed, the PI was Nick Shackleton, and then suddenly it turns to be a very good proposal. So.
For your second question, really quick, we're really hoping to trial that soon at Nature Geoscience, a blind author and blind reviewer. It just turned out to be a technology issue that we're having a long time working around. Basically, we run the risk of losing the author details entirely at present. So, yes, we need a little bit of a patch to try and work that out. But I am hoping in the next year or so, we're going to trial that as an option. For the first one, I think it's a lot of times as an editor, I'm looking for the author's replies more so than any other experiments. Like, do you consider it? Do you think that's useful? What would these results change one way or another? And I think if you can't always see them, but have a good reason why, or you know, like if you play with some numbers and see even if this shifts this way, it doesn't affect our conclusions. A lot of times we can say, yeah, you don't have 5 years to get this published. We'll go with it as is. And that's another thing as a reviewer to be. Everyone always wants more experiments, but there does come. If we were waiting for everything, it would take 10 years to publish a paper. So, as a reviewer, yeah, it's something to be aware of.
I've been an editor and a reviewer of several journals, so my experience is that there are two problems. The first one is really to find reviewers who are working in the central area of the topic of the paper. And you have to be very careful with that. If we don't do it, then we have problems. And the second is time pressure. Reviewing needs time. Sometimes you have to read a paper and then wait for 2 or 3 days, especially if the paper is in your own area and you think first that it would be better if you would have done this work. Then wait for 3 or 4 days, read other papers and be very careful and fair, and always think that the author wants to learn something for his or her life. And you have to be very careful with time pressure.
In the literature cited, there is a good balance of what has been done a long time ago, which is the base of the research, and the new developments which are using these studies. I think this is something that sometimes it's forgotten, and I have several times encouraged my PhD students to cite what I have done, because at that time I was the first to do so on my snail record, and they were saying, we can't always cite you. I said, yes, but if you don't cite what I have done, what's up?
We're going to run short on time, so let's have one more question.
I think the way I do it is that I look for something new that is being said, whether experiments are valid or one thing, but does this article or paper contribute something new to a region or to a science? If it is not, then it is not it. Something new should come out of the paper, number one. Second thing I often do is that I try to look at the figures and the data and tables and see what kind of interpretations I can arrive at myself. Then I go and read the paper, and then I see the reviews as of the paper, and then make a conscious decision. So that there is essentially my own review has to be there as an editor. So that helps a lot. And it takes time, of course. It's set data. So I think it will be very good if the journals can remove their automatic reminder system. Every second there is a reminder that your review is 10 days overdue, 12 days overdue. That is important. The other thing which is important is that often we find, as you said about Chinese articles being not there, I think often we have asked the authors to supply an English translation or whatever of the papers they cite, because we don't have access, and they are obliged to do that, because otherwise we can't judge what's happening. The third thing is, as was said by Werner, after you review, leave it for 2 days. Think of that it's an important contribution by a person for his career, for his science, whatever, and see, can you act? And more importantly, if you say no, say why do you say no? If you say yes, say why you say yes. If you say no, also give recommendations of what he can do to improve a comeback. I think we are obliged to do this, very clearly state what is it requires, what is it you are looking for, that this paper can be acceptable. And that's important for us to identify. You have to tell no, why, yes, why, and what improvement can be done.
Stress that enough, but support why you're saying what you're saying. Are there key citations? Like, why are you saying what you are? Is it because some other method in this paper? Like, provide all the citations you can, because a lot of times the editor isn't versed in all of the technical. Most of the times, your editor is not versed in every technical paper that underlies the technique in that paper. So I don't think we can say that enough.
Because I think we're running short on time, I wish we could continue. I want to finish quickly with a quick show of hands. And I'm curious, because I was really shocked at how many of us had actually are actually active as reviewers. I'm curious if you can put your hand up if you received any training or mentorship on this whatsoever, or if you were learning in the dark. So put your hand up if you received any kind of mentor. Scientists that we receive some mentorship on this very important and very interesting process. So I hope this was useful for everybody, and cheers.